You have made us scum and refuse among the nations. All our enemies have opened their mouths wide against us. We have suffered terror and pitfalls, ruin and destruction. Streams of tears flow from my eyes because my people are destroyed. My eyes will flow unceasingly without relief until the Lord looks down from heaven and sees. What I see brings grief to my soul because of all the women of my city. Those who were my enemies without cause hunted me like a bird. They tried to end my life in a pit and threw stones at me. The waters closed over my head, and I thought I was about to perish.
The first time I went to the red light district, I looked up and down the streets and I noticed that they were lined with beautiful colors. And then I realized that those colors were dresses, flowing dresses. And inside each one of those beautiful splashes of color was a body, a person made in the image of God.
They have to be locked in this room with no windows, one door. They're beaten, they're starved, they're beat into submission. And when their will is finally broken, then they can get out of there. And they remember those. Those were violent times. And they don't want that to happen to them again. And so they're very careful. They want to be sure they can trust anybody who tries to help them get out of the situation they're in.
As they stood there at either side of the road, the streets were busy and bustling, and men were flowing through the streets, looking at the women on either side, giggling. They were all ages, and when I stopped and I really thought, this is what they're doing, this is what they're here for. It had to shake my head. It's hard to believe that they're so blatant about it. Well, anyway, then we'd walk into one of the buildings, and the buildings would be dark when you first walked into them. They had narrow, winding staircases that were just filthy. In the corners of each time you turn around to go to the next floor, the corners was just littered with trash and used condoms. And then often you'd see a child, maybe 2-3 years old, playing in the midst of that filth. I would look at them and I'd think, I hope that child hasn't been abused yet.
Four years ago, I went on a trip to India for sex trafficking, and we went into the red light district, and I met another woman from Romania who was very interested in sex trafficking and wanted to incorporate that into her home back in Romania, and just kind of wanted to dabble in it, get her feet wet, and kind of see if it was something that she wanted to do. She felt very called and led, and a couple years later she bought a safe house in Romania and started the ball rolling.
Because there, when the girls turn 18, they age out of the orphanage and they're just put on the street with $30. Now, I know that their money isn't comparable to our money, but you sure can't do much for $30.
So I first heard about trafficking years ago, and then eventually I ended up with a chance to go to Iraq with an organization called Greater Change. And the first time I went there, I met a young woman who was 16 years old at the time I met her. And she shared her story with us, and it was absolutely horrific what had happened to her. She had been in a small village with her parents and her family, just living her life, and she was 12 years old when ISIS came through her village, and they beheaded her brother and her father in front of her and her mother, and then they had taken her and her mother into sex slavery and split them up. And this girl, who was 12 when they took her, for 4 years, every single day, she was being used up to 25 times a day by ISIS fighters. And eventually she was able to escape. Although she wouldn't tell us how, she was able to escape, and she managed to make her way back to an IDP camp that her aunt was living in at the time. And her aunt took her in, which was completely a blessing from God, because for a lot of those families, they won't take their children back after they've been used in this way. But her aunt took her in, but of course she had a lot of medical things that were not right anymore and emotionally, and so she would have nightmares when she would sleep and wake up screaming, and she did try to commit suicide, but her aunt stopped her. It was heartbreaking to see, and we brought her nail polish one day and painted her nails, and right before we were getting ready to leave, she said, "Oh, wait, I have something for you." And so she ran back into her tent, and then she came out and she was holding a teddy bear that she handed to me, and she finally looked at me and she smiled and she said, "This is for you."
As we're talking about trafficking around the world, it's been on my heart to talk about trafficking here in the United States. A lot of times, some of the definitions of trafficking, we think they're sold by a relative or they're kidnapped and sold into trafficking. A lot of the trafficking that happens here in the United States has to do with the pornography industry and sucking girls in online.
My 4-year-old daughter was playing in the front yard of our home, and she was taken by a man, and she was taken by a man, and he was able to take videos and pictures of him abusing her and posted them to, we have no idea where, on the dark web, and send them to many unknown people. And then he was able to return her, thankfully, and we got her back. But before this incident, I had no idea the effects of pornography on sex trafficking, and how pornography does not discriminate. It does not care if you are rich or poor or male or female, what your background is. If you get involved in that, it grips your entire life and completely takes over, and it can cause you to make decisions that you maybe would not have made. And I'm here to use my story to spread awareness about trafficking and how it affects anybody in every corner of the world.
With over 28.4 million women and girls in trafficking, and then when we hear stories like the ones we've heard, the problem can feel absolutely overwhelming. But at Vision Beyond Borders, our goal is always the one woman rescued, the one girl saved, the one life changed.
Is that we have a salon to where the girls can freely come to, and we're able to minister to them and show them how much we truly care for them. And there was this one gal that had been in there for 10 years and had come to the salon, never had anything done, but she always came with her friend, and she'd never smiled in the 10 years or even spoke to anyone in the 10 years that she had been there. So when she came in, her friend sat in the chair, and I asked her if I could pray for her. And she went like this, and I was like, oh. But in India, that means yes. So I was able to pray for her, and we had an interpreter there, so I was able to visit with her and just let her know that she is very special, and God cares about her. We care about her because we're there to help them in any way that we can. And so as her friend got done, I asked her if she would like something done, and she said no. But I sat there while her friend was getting it done, and I just loved on her. I patted her on the leg and just talked with her and just in a loving way that she would know that we truly do care about her and all the other girls there. So when she left and when she got to the door, she had tears in her eyes, and she turned around and waved, and she smiled. And they said that was the first time that she had smiled the whole time she was there.
Just recently, 2 young girls whose mother has never wanted anything to do with the ministry, but has allowed the children to come to the day-night care. She finally agreed to let the children go out of the area, and they're now living with our contact and her family until other arrangements can be made.
Nora was so diligent and she worked so hard to get more and more girls into that safe house. And last I talked to Nora, there was 3 or 4 maybe, and it's just continuing to grow. Like, word of mouth, people are like, there's a safe place to go. Nora is just phenomenal, and God has definitely blessed her and those girls, and she is really doing a great work keeping those girls safe from sex trafficking and ending that vicious circle of sex trafficking in Romania.
But we had heard this story from Vision Beyond Borders about a brothel owner one of our contacts in India had been in contact with. And she had just kept ministering to this lady who owned all these other women and wasn't really getting anywhere with them, wasn't really seeing any progress. And eventually this brothel owner realized what they were doing was wrong, and they let all of the women and girls that they owned go free. And it just was about that one person that our contact kept trying to reach.
We need to be more open in the church about having the conversation about how pornography fuels sex trafficking and leads to girls being trapped or having videos of them put out there that they would not have chosen to be involved in. And it's just not talked about enough.
And when you stop and think, we're born with so much in America. We have so much opportunity. But in India, they're born with what they get. Many of them have no hope or think they have no hope of ever getting out of that situation. And when I look at those children and I just think, wow, I could have been them. But for the grace of God, go I. I could be born in that situation. But I wasn't. I was born in the UK, and now I live in America. And we have wealth here, we have freedom, and we have endless possibilities. I believe that as Christians, we have a responsibility to use what God has given us to help people in these situations. And again, sometimes you think it would be nice to go in there and just help everybody all at once, just like whisk them away and take them to wonderful shelter. But that's not realistic. And it's just not feasible. However, one by one, these ladies, these children, these young girls can be helped. And that's what we're there for. We're there to help one, to rescue one woman, to save one girl, to change one life.
God is a God who sees. There's not one woman or girl or person enslaved in trafficking that he doesn't know their name, that he doesn't love them, that their story isn't known to him. He has entrusted us with the responsibility to take the love of Jesus to the one woman, the one girl, the one child who the Lord puts in front of us. And he doesn't ask us to change the whole world. He just asks us to take the life-giving message of the gospel to the ones who desperately need it, and to trust his power to change lives, to change communities, to change cultures, and eventually to change the world. But we have to be obedient to him. And so I want to ask you, how far are you willing to go for the one person?
A little girl is walking along the beach, and she sees a guy bending down, and the beach is flooded with starfish that have washed up on the beach. And she sees this guy picking up one at a time and throwing them back out into the ocean. And she said, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "It doesn't really matter. Look at all these starfish." And he said, "Well, it matters to the one I threw back."
I called on your name, Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ears to my cry for relief. You came near when I called you, and you said, "Do not fear." You, Lord, took up my case. You redeemed my life. Lord, you have seen the wrong done to me. Uphold my cause.